There's something about driving at night that feels different from the daytime. The roads are quieter, the towns feel emptier, and sometimes it feels like you're the only person left in the world. But if you've ever taken a long drive after midnight, you probably know that feeling that creeps in slowly. The moment when the road gets darker, the streetlights disappear, and your headlights become the only thing separating you from whatever is waiting ahead. Most night drives are completely normal. You get where you're going, turn off the engine, and forget about it the next day. But sometimes something happens on those roads. Something you can't easily explain. And once you see it, or hear it, or realize what was actually following you, you never look at an empty highway the same way again. Tonight, I'm sharing 10 true-style night drive horror stories that happened to ordinary people during drives they thought would be completely routine. Story 1. The car that stayed behind me. I used to work the late shift at a warehouse outside my city, which meant I got off work around 1:30 in the morning almost every night. The drive home took about 40 minutes, mostly along a long two-lane highway surrounded by farmland and empty fields. At that hour, it was usually dead quiet. Maybe one or two cars would pass every 10 minutes. Most nights were completely uneventful. I'd turn a podcast, keep the speed around 60, and enjoy the calm drive home. But one night about 3 years ago, something happened that made me stop taking that road for a long time. About 10 minutes after leaving work, I noticed headlights behind me. Story 2. The man on the shoulder. A few years ago, I had to drive across 2 states to visit my sister after she had surgery. I left late in the evening because I couldn't get off work earlier, which meant most of the drive happened after midnight. Around 2 a.m., I was on a long stretch of highway that ran through a forest area. There were no towns nearby for miles, just trees, darkness, and the occasional truck passing by. I was starting to feel tired, so I rolled down the window for some fresh air and turned the radio up a little. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a road sign or maybe a mailbox reflecting my headlights. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a man standing on the shoulder of the highway. That alone was strange enough. There was nothing out there. No houses, no broken down cars, nothing that would explain why someone was standing beside the road at 2 in the morning. He was facing the road, completely still. As my headlights reached him, I slowed down instinctively. He was wearing dark clothes and holding something in his hand that I couldn't quite make out. Maybe a bag. For a second, I wondered if he needed help. But something about the way he stood there made me uneasy. He wasn't waving for help. He wasn't trying to flag me down. He was just watching the road, watching my car. As I passed him, he slowly turned his head to follow me. I felt a chill run through me, but I kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I could see him still standing there. Then something happened that made my heart start pounding. He stepped onto the road. At first, I thought he might be crossing to the other side, but he wasn't. He started walking in the same direction I was driving, right in the middle of the lane. I sped up slightly, trying to create distance. After about 30 seconds, I glanced in my mirror again, and he was still there, walking the road. Except now, he looked closer than he should have been. I told myself it was just the darkness playing tricks on my depth perception. But every time I checked the mirror, he seemed a little closer. Still walking, still directly in the middle of the lane. And the strangest part, I never saw another car pass him. Eventually, I reached the next town and pulled into a brightly lit rest stop. I stayed there for about 20 minutes, trying to calm down before continuing the drive. Before leaving, I asked the employee working the counter if there had been any reports of someone walking on the highway nearby. He frowned and said something that still makes my skin crawl. There shouldn't be anyone walking out there. Then he paused and added quietly, especially not where that accident happened. Story 3. The truck that wouldn't pass. A few years ago, I used to work security at a small office complex outside the city. My shift ended at midnight, and my drive home took about 30 minutes using a long stretch of rural highway that barely had any traffic that late. The road itself was simple. 2 lanes going each direction, a forest on one side, open fields on the other. During the day, it looked normal, but at night it felt completely isolated. One night in late October, I remember leaving work around 12:15 a.m. The weather was cold, and a light fog had started forming along the highway. Visibility wasn't terrible, but the headlights from cars seemed brighter than usual because of the mist. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights coming up behind me very quickly. Within seconds, the vehicle was close enough that I could see it clearly in my mirrors. It was a large pickup truck, dark-colored, maybe black or dark blue. The headlights were bright and slightly higher than my car, which made them shine directly into my rearview mirror. Normally, when someone comes up behind you that fast, they just pass. But this truck didn't. Instead, it stayed directly behind me. At first, I thought maybe the driver was waiting for a better place to pass. So I slowed down slightly and moved closer to the right side of the lane to make it easier. The truck stayed behind me. A minute passed, then another. The road ahead was completely empty. No oncoming cars. No traffic. There was plenty of space for the driver to pass. But they didn't. Instead, the truck slowly moved closer and closer until it was riding my bumper. I remember feeling irritated at first. I sped up a little, hoping they would finally go around me. They didn't. The truck matched my speed exactly. After about 5 minutes of this, the situation started feeling less like a normal impatient driver and more like something intentional. The truck was so close now that I couldn't see its front grille anymore, just the bright headlights filling my mirrors. I tried slowing down again. The truck slowed too. That's when I decided to test something. I changed lanes. Instead of passing me like any normal driver would, the truck also changed lanes. It stayed directly behind me. My stomach dropped. Now I was convinced the driver wasn't just coincidentally behind me. They were following me. The highway was empty in both directions. Just darkness and fog stretching for miles. I considered calling someone, but I didn't even know what I would say. A truck is driving behind me didn't exactly sound like an emergency. Still, I started gripping the steering wheel tighter. After another mile or two, the road curved slightly and passed through a small wooded section. That's when something happened that made the situation feel even worse. The truck suddenly turned off its headlights. Completely. 1 second, my mirrors were filled with light. The next second, there was nothing but darkness behind me. For a moment, I thought maybe the truck had turned off onto another road without me noticing. But then I looked carefully into the darkness behind me, and I could still make out the faint outline of the truck. It was still there, still following me, just without headlights. At that point, I felt a genuine wave of fear. Driving that close behind someone at night with no headlights isn't normal behavior. I pressed the gas harder and accelerated. The truck stayed with me. I was now going almost 20 miles over the speed limit, and the truck was still right behind me. Finally, the highway approached an exit that led toward a busier part of town. Without signaling, I took the exit quickly. For the first time since it appeared, the truck didn't follow. It stayed on the highway and continued straight. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station at the end of the exit and sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to calm down. Eventually, I went inside to grab a drink. While I was paying, I casually mentioned to the cashier that a truck had been tailgating me for miles on the highway. He looked at me strangely and asked what kind of truck. I told him it was a dark pickup. He nodded slowly and said something that I still think about sometimes. "You're not the first person who's mentioned that truck." I asked what he meant. He shrugged and said, "People come in here late at night, sometimes saying the same thing. A truck following them for miles on that highway." I asked if anyone had ever figured out who the driver was. The cashier shook his head. Then he said something that made the whole experience feel even more disturbing. "Most of them say the truck turns its headlights off too." Story 4. The passenger I didn't pick up. This happened about 5 years ago when I was driving home from a concert in another city. The concert ended around 11 p.m., and by the time I got out of the parking lot and onto the highway, it was almost midnight. The drive home was about 2 hours, mostly along quiet country roads. About halfway through the trip, I exited the highway to take a smaller road that cut through farmland. It saved about 20 minutes, but it was extremely dark and barely had any houses along it. I had driven that road many times before, so it didn't bother me. About 10 minutes after turning onto the road, I saw something ahead in my headlights. Someone standing beside the road. At first, I thought it was a jogger or maybe someone whose car had broken down. But as I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She was standing on the gravel shoulder, facing the road. She raised one arm slightly as my headlights reached her, like she might be trying to signal for help. I slowed down instinctively, but something about the situation felt off. There was no car nearby, no house, nothing but empty farmland and darkness. Still, I felt bad just leaving someone stranded. I slowed almost to a stop as I passed her. For a moment, I considered rolling down the window to ask if she needed help. But as my car moved beside her, I looked directly at her face, and something about it made me change my mind immediately. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even really looking at me. Her expression was completely blank, almost emotionless, and the way she stood there felt unnatural, perfectly still, like she had been waiting there for a long time. I kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing exactly where I left her, not moving, just watching my car disappear down the road. After about 30 seconds, I started feeling guilty. Maybe she really needed help. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she was stranded. I almost turned around, but then I noticed something strange in my side mirror. At first, I thought it was just a reflection or maybe a trick of the light. But then I saw it again, a shape in the back seat. My heart instantly started racing. I slowly turned my head to glance behind me. The back seat was empty, completely empty. I looked forward again, trying to calm myself down. Maybe I had imagined it. But a few seconds later, I checked the mirror again. And for just a split second, I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat, right behind me. I slammed the brakes and turned around in my seat. Nothing. The back seat was empty. No one there. No bags. No shadows. Nothing. I sat there in the middle of the road for almost a full minute, breathing heavily. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But the thing that still bothers me is what I saw in my rearview mirror when I started driving again. Way down the road behind me, I could see someone walking in my direction. Story 5. The car parked in the woods. A few years ago, I used to take a shortcut through a forest road whenever I drove home from visiting a friend in another town. The normal highway route took almost an hour, but this smaller road cut through the woods and reduced the drive to about 40 minutes. During the day, it was actually a nice drive. Tall trees lined both sides of the road, and there were occasional clearings where you could see small lakes or abandoned cabins hidden deeper in the forest. At night, though, the road felt completely different. There were no streetlights, no houses, no businesses, just miles of empty road cutting through thick woods. Most nights it didn't bother me, but one night something happened that made me avoid that road ever since. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning when I turned onto the forest road. The sky was completely dark, and a light fog was hanging low between the trees. For the first 10 minutes, everything was normal. My headlights illuminated the narrow road ahead, and the only sound was the hum of my tires against the pavement. Then I noticed something strange. Up ahead on the right side of the road, partially hidden between the trees, there was a car. At first, I thought it might belong to someone camping or maybe a hunter who had parked off the road. But as I got closer, the situation started to feel wrong. The car wasn't parked in a proper turnout or clearing. It was pushed halfway into the woods. The front of the car faced the road, but the rest of it disappeared between the trees like someone had deliberately tried to hide it. And the headlights were off. I slowed down slightly as I passed. For a brief moment, my headlights illuminated the interior of the car. That's when I noticed the driver's door was open, wide open, but I couldn't see anyone inside. I kept driving, but the image stuck in my mind. A car hidden in the woods. Door open. No one around. After about 2 minutes, curiosity started getting the better of me. I wondered if maybe someone had crashed or needed help. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and turned the car around at the next small gravel intersection. As I drove back toward where the car was parked, my headlights cut through the fog and the trees. But when I reached the spot, the car was gone. Completely gone. At first I thought I had somehow mistaken the location, but I knew exactly where it had been. There was even a small gap in the trees where the car had been pushed in. Now it was empty. The space between the trees was just darkness. I sat there for a moment, confused. Maybe the driver had started the car and left while I turned around. But that didn't make sense. The road was straight for miles. I would have seen the headlights if a car had driven away. Still, I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe I had just imagined the door being open. I started driving again, and about 30 seconds later, I noticed headlights behind me. A car had appeared on the road. It wasn't far back either, maybe 100 yards behind me, which was strange because I hadn't passed any cars for at least 15 minutes before that. The headlights stayed behind me as I continued driving. Same distance, same speed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the car looked familiar. About 5 minutes later, I passed the only gas station along that road and pulled in. The car behind me kept going without stopping. As it drove past the gas station lights, I finally saw it clearly. It was the same car I had seen parked in the woods, and the driver's door was still open. Story 6. Someone was already in the back seat. This happened when I was in college and working late shifts at a restaurant. Most nights, I finished work around midnight. The drive home took about 20 minutes through a quiet residential area and then a long stretch of road that ran along a small lake. It was usually peaceful, and I actually enjoyed the quiet drive after a busy shift. One night, I remember being extremely tired after work. I got in my car, locked the doors automatically like I always did, and started driving home. Everything seemed normal for the first 10 minutes. Then I noticed something odd. My rearview mirror had been slightly tilted downward. I assumed I must have bumped it earlier when cleaning my car or something. So while stopped at a red light, I reached up and adjusted it. And that's when I saw it. For just a split second, I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat. I turned around immediately. The back seat was empty. I laughed nervously to myself, assuming the shadows had played tricks on me. The interior of the car was dark, and the streetlights created weird reflections. Still, I adjusted the mirror again, just to be sure. Nothing. The light turned green, and I continued driving. A few minutes later, I passed the lake road where there were almost no streetlights. The only light came from my dashboard and the faint glow of the moon reflecting off the water. As I drove along the empty road, I glanced at the rearview mirror again, and my heart nearly stopped. There was a shape behind me, someone sitting directly in the middle of the back seat. I slammed the brakes and turned around instantly. Nothing. The back seat was empty again. At that point, I felt my chest tightening with panic. I pulled the car over onto the side of the road and turned on the interior light. I checked every corner of the back seat. Nothing. No one there. No bags. No shadows. The seat was completely empty. I tried to convince myself that I was just exhausted and imagining things. So I turned off the interior light and started driving again. But the entire time, I couldn't stop looking at the rearview mirror. Every few seconds I checked it, and every time, I thought I could see something moving slightly in the darkness behind me. Finally, I reached my apartment complex and parked under a bright streetlight. Before getting out of the car, I looked into the mirror one last time. The back seat was empty. I opened the door and stepped out. As I walked around the back of the car toward my apartment building, I glanced through the rear window, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the back seat shift slightly, like someone had just stood up. Story 7. The long road with no exit. A few years ago, I had a job that required me to drive long distances between small towns late at night. One particular route took me through a long, straight rural road that cut across miles of farmland. During the day, it was completely normal. A few scattered houses, occasional barns, and wide open fields. But at night, it felt like driving through the middle of nowhere. There were almost no lights anywhere. Just darkness stretching across the fields and the faint outline of trees along the horizon. The road itself was simple. One lane in each direction and a few small side roads every couple of miles. I had driven that road dozens of times before without anything unusual happening. But one night, around 2 a.m., something happened that made the drive feel wrong. I remember turning onto the road after leaving a small gas station. My GPS said the next town was about 20 minutes away. The first few minutes were normal. My headlights illuminated the empty road ahead, while the fields on both sides faded into darkness. About 5 minutes into the drive, I noticed something strange. The GPS still said 20 minutes remaining. That didn't make sense. Even driving slowly, the distance should have changed at least a little by then. I assumed the signal was just lagging, so I ignored it and kept driving. But after another 5 minutes, I looked again. Still 20 minutes. Now, I started paying closer attention to the road itself. The strange thing was, it looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes earlier. Same long stretch of road. Same empty fields. Same dark tree line in the distance. I tried to think logically. Maybe I'd taken the wrong road earlier without realizing it. But the GPS still showed the correct route. So I kept driving. 10 more minutes passed. When I checked the GPS again, it still said 20 minutes to the next town. That's when I started feeling uneasy. I glanced around, looking for something recognizable. Normally, there were at least a few farmhouses along the road, but I hadn't passed a single one. Just fields and darkness. Eventually, I saw a small side road ahead and decided to turn off just to see where it went. But when I got closer, something strange happened. The road disappeared. Not physically, but the sign that marked the road was gone. I was certain there had been a sign when I saw it in the distance. But when I reached the intersection, there was nothing there. Just an empty gravel path leading into darkness. I continued driving. At this point, I was definitely uncomfortable. The road felt endless. After another 10 minutes, I started noticing something even stranger. The same broken fence on the right side of the road. I had already passed it earlier. I was sure of it. The wood posts leaned at the same angle, and one of the boards hung loose. I had noticed it before because it stood out against the empty fields. But now I was seeing it again, which meant one of two things. Either I had somehow turned around without realizing it, or I had been driving in a circle. But that didn't make sense. The road had been completely straight the entire time. Eventually, I saw headlights coming toward me from the opposite direction. Relieved, I slowed down slightly as the other car approached. It was the first vehicle I had seen in almost 40 minutes. As the car passed, I glanced quickly at the driver. The person behind the wheel looked straight ahead, completely expressionless. But what bothered me wasn't the driver. It was the car itself, because I recognized it. It was the same car that had passed me earlier that night. The exact same one. I knew because there was a dent on the passenger door shaped like a triangle. I had noticed it earlier when the car drove by, and now it had just passed me again, coming from the opposite direction, on a road that had been empty the entire time. Story 8. The headlights that appeared too fast. A couple years ago, I was driving home after visiting some friends in another town. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and the highway was almost completely empty. I had music playing quietly while cruising around 60 miles per hour. The road stretched straight ahead for miles with only occasional streetlights. After about 20 minutes of driving, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A pair of headlights. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Cars appear behind you all the time on highways. But within seconds, I realized something strange. The headlights were getting closer extremely fast. Way faster than they should have been. It looked like the car behind me was going at least twice my speed. Within a few seconds, the lights were right behind me, so close that they filled my mirrors completely. I moved slightly to the right side of the lane, assuming the driver would pass. But the car didn't pass. Instead, it stayed right behind me. The headlights were so bright I couldn't see anything else. No outline of the car, no shape, just light. I slowed down slightly to encourage the driver to go around. The lights slowed down too. Now they were riding my bumper, and something about the situation felt wrong. The road ahead was completely empty. There was no reason for the driver not to pass. After about a minute, the headlights suddenly swerved into the other lane. I expected the car to accelerate past me, but instead, the lights disappeared completely. I checked the mirror again. Nothing. No headlights. No car. Just darkness. That didn't make sense. There were no exits or side roads nearby. And if the car had slowed down, I would still see the lights in the distance. But they were gone. I kept driving, feeling unsettled. About 5 minutes later, I glanced in my mirror again, and my stomach dropped. The same headlights were back, right behind me, just as close as before, like the car had never left. Story 9. The voice on the radio. This happened during a long drive I took across state lines for work. It was a 6-hour trip, and I left late in the evening to avoid traffic. By the time I reached the rural part of the highway, it was already after midnight. I had been driving for about 3 hours when I started flipping through radio stations to stay awake. Most of them were static because I was far from any major cities. Eventually, I found a station playing quiet music and left it there. For about 20 minutes, everything was normal. Then the music suddenly cut out. I assumed the signal had faded. But instead of static, I heard something else. A voice. At first, it sounded like someone speaking quietly into a microphone. The words were muffled and distorted, like a weak radio transmission. I turned up the volume. The voice became slightly clearer. It sounded like a man, and he was repeating the same phrase over and over. I couldn't understand most of it, except one word. Turn. The voice kept repeating it. Turn, turn, turn. I frowned and glanced at the empty highway ahead. There were no intersections nearby. Then suddenly the voice said something else. Louder this time. Turn around. Immediately after that, the radio returned to normal music like nothing had happened. I remember feeling a little uneasy, but I assumed it was some kind of radio interference. Still, the message stuck in my mind. Turn around. About 2 minutes later, I noticed something ahead on the road. A large truck had stopped sideways across both lanes, completely blocking the highway. I slammed the brakes just in time. If I had been going even slightly faster, I would have hit it. Story 10. The same car twice. This happened during a late-night drive home from visiting family. It was around midnight, and I was traveling along a quiet highway that passed through several small towns. Traffic was almost non-existent. At one point, I passed a small red car parked on the shoulder of the road with its hazard lights blinking. I slowed down slightly as I drove past. Inside the car, I saw a man sitting in the driver's seat. He didn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead. I assumed he had car trouble and continued driving. About 15 minutes later, I entered the next town. As I passed through the main street, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Parked on the side of the road was the same red car. Hazard lights blinking. Same model. Same dent on the front bumper. And the same man sitting inside, staring straight ahead. I slowed down, confused. There was no way he could have reached the town before me. There was only one road connecting the two places, and I hadn't seen him pass me. Still, I told myself it must just be a similar car. I continued driving. Another 20 minutes passed. Eventually, I reached a gas station near my hometown and pulled in. As I parked and stepped out of my car, I noticed another vehicle pulling into the station. A red car, with hazard lights blinking. I froze as it rolled slowly into the parking lot. The same man sat in the driver's seat, still staring straight ahead. The car stopped near the pump, but the man never got out. He didn't move. He didn't turn his head. He just sat there, like he had the entire time. And for some reason, I had the strange feeling that he had been seeing me too. Every single time. Those were 10 true-style night drive horror stories that showed just how strange the road can feel after midnight. Sometimes it's just your imagination. Sometimes it's exhaustion. But other times, something happens that you can't fully explain. Something that stays with you long after the drive is over. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more long-form horror stories designed for late-night listening. And let me know in the comments, which story disturbed you the most? And if you've ever experienced something strange while driving at night, I'd love to hear your story too. That wasn't unusual at first. Cars occasionally came onto the highway from side roads, so I didn't think much about it. But after a few minutes, I realized something strange. The car wasn't passing me. Normally, if someone caught up to you on that highway, they'd either pass immediately or slow down and turn off somewhere. But this car stayed directly behind me, about the same distance, maybe 3 car lengths back. At first, I assumed the driver just didn't want to pass on a dark road. But after another 10 minutes, it started to feel weird. Every time I slowed down slightly, the car slowed down too. When I sped up a little, it matched my speed perfectly. It stayed behind me through 2 intersections where it easily could have turned off. That's when I started getting uneasy. I looked at my rearview mirror more often. The headlights were bright enough that I couldn't see the car itself clearly, just the glare filling my mirrors. I tried to brush it off. Maybe the person was just heading the same direction. But then I did something that made the situation feel a lot worse. I turned onto a smaller side road. This road wasn't part of my usual route home. I only used it occasionally when I wanted to stop at a 24-hour gas station on the other side of town. It curved through a dark rural area with almost no houses. When I made the turn, I expected the car behind me to keep going. Instead, it turned too. Now my stomach dropped. At that point, I told myself it was still possible they were just going the same way. But the road ahead was almost completely empty farmland for miles. Hardly anyone used it at night. The car stayed behind me. Same distance, same speed. The road got darker as we went farther. No streetlights, just my headlights cutting through the road ahead and the glow of theirs filling my mirrors. After another 5 minutes, I decided to test something. I slowed way down, like 30 miles per hour. The car slowed too. That's when I started to panic a little. I pressed the gas and sped up to almost 70, which was way too fast for that road. The car stayed right behind me. It felt like whoever was driving wasn't just following the road. They were following me. Up ahead, there was a small gas station that stayed open all night. It was the only place around with lights and cameras. I decided I'd pull in there. As soon as the bright lights of the station came into view, I relaxed slightly. I turned into the parking lot quickly and parked near the entrance. And that's when something strange happened. The car behind me didn't pull in. It slowed down, almost like it was deciding what to do. Then it drove past the gas station. As it passed under the light, I finally saw the car clearly for the first time. It was an old dark sedan, and the driver's seat looked empty. I sat there staring as the car continued down the road and disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, I thought maybe the angle of the light had tricked me. Maybe the driver leaned down or something. But the thing that still bothers me to this day is what the cashier told me when I went inside. I mentioned that a car had been following me for miles. He looked at the road outside and said something that made my stomach twist. "You're the first car that's passed here in over an hour."